Hi folks! Welcome to a brief introduction to project-based learning. The purpose of this slideshow presentation is to give you some ideas on how you might get started in your own curriculum doing some things that are more project-based. So for a quick overview of what project-based learning is, it starts with the actual project or problem that the kids have to do. This should be something that people actually do have to do in the real world or a need that already has to be met. It's mapped to the actual learning objective, so you're still teaching your curriculum skills. They work together in teams. The teacher can differentiate the instruction through the use of flipped videos or in-class workshops. The students do some sort of final presentation to some sort of judges that you bring in from the outside, and then there's a reflection process so they can look back on how well they did and what they might do better on the next round. A lot of people who hear about project-based learning say, well, that's nothing. I've been doing projects for years. It's like, yes, you probably have, but projects the way you and I were taught in school and probably projects we've done on our own with our classrooms are usually things that come at the end of a unit. So the kids have been studying something and then you get to the end and then it's usually something involving a shoebox or salt flower maps, but then they have to do something that's considered enrichment or it's an extra way to get a test grade for the students to see if you can evaluate them. Project-based learning flips that. The project itself or the problem that needs to be solved is actually what drives the learning, not what comes at the end. And the assessment is not just at the end with the project itself, but comes at multiple points throughout the whole process. And the purpose of this is not only to teach the curriculum more effectively, but it gets to those soft skills that we like to talk about as well as your individual curriculum skills that you need to teach. So the real benefit of doing teaching this way is that you get to these so-called soft skills in addition to mastering your individual curriculum. These are the things that we know that employers tell us that they are looking for with students who come out of the schools. This involves the ability to do critical thinking, to use technology in an effective way, doing kinds of research, analyzing results, being able to handle conflict resolution, doing effective oral and written communication, and just that general sense of professionalism. One cry that most teachers are used to hearing in the classroom is, why do I have to know this? Whatever will I ever use this again? Well, with project-based learning, the students actually see that the process is just as important as what it is that they're trying to learn. And that sense of accomplishment that they get by actually working on this project, having the results evaluated by people from outside of the school, and seeing that they can work through these difficulties, it just completely turns around your atmosphere in the classroom and students' sense of why, a purpose for why it is that they're studying what they're studying. If you want to see how project-based learning works in action, Edutopia has put together this really great little video that shows you a school in action going through some different projects. If you copy and paste that link into your browser, you can go ahead and watch that short film on your own at your own convenience. So like many things, the problem is always how do you get started with this? So if you're a traditional teacher used to giving lectures from PowerPoints and having the kids do assignments and work through activities and things in class, the idea of going into a project-based mode can be really kind of frightening. So you start where you start with anything with your good Stephen Covey model of beginning with the end in mind. So what is it that you want the kids to actually have done and be able to show as a result of what they've learned? Then you start with your driving question. What is the essential question that they're going to be trying to figure out as they go through this project? You work on how you're going to assess that. So how will you know what they know? You map out the whole project for them. You kind of plan the whole thing out together, and then you kind of manage the process with them as they go through it. And I'll break those steps down a little bit more as we go through some more slides here. So the basic life cycle of a project starts with this driving question or challenge that is the problem that's being posed or the project that has to be created. The students figure out what they're going to need to know in order to solve that problem or meet that challenge. They go into inquiry and innovation where they try to create things, they're questioning things, they're testing hypotheses, they're using the 21st century skills with using all the Web 2.0 tools. The students actually get a voice and choice in how they decide what they need to learn and what would be the best way for them to figure that out. They get feedback from the teacher constantly, and they're able to do revision all along the way, and then they have their publicly presented product at the end. Yeah, you might be saying, but I'm brand new to this. How do I possibly create a really good, effective project? Well, one of the ways to start is to start brainstorming, what do people in your curriculum area already do? So if you're a healthful living teacher, what do people do with that information? Do they conduct clinics? Do they publish papers? Do they go and work one-on-one with clients? Do they write cookbooks? You look at what these people do. What are the needs in your field that can be met by the skills in your curriculum area? What are the problems that have to be solved? And then you take a look at your core standards and you start mapping those out to what are the skills that students should be able to demonstrate, and how can they demonstrate that by doing the things that people in that field do. Now, this is a very big list with apparently very small type of a whole bunch of past projects that have been successful. Now, some of these are things that I've done or things that colleagues have done, and I'm not going to read them all out loud to you. You can scan through those. But for example, students might organize some sort of a fundraiser or charity project. They might look at what do people in developing nations need, and how could I develop some sort of a cook stove or water sterilization method. They might publish something. They might create a model that shows how population growth might be working in a certain area, and how can they make predictions from that. They might design a system for an egg drop or a catapult or a launcher or something that uses physics principles. They might make a video or a movie. You can see all the different possibilities of ways that projects can actually come about. My favorite part of every project is the entry document. The entry document, or sometimes an entry event, is where you introduce the project to the students, and it's really what's going to lay the foundation for the whole project. You start with the problem that has to be solved or the project that's going to be completed. The entry document has to be really carefully designed so that everything you want the students to have to learn is going to be in there, that they will find that is something they're going to need to know in order to accomplish the project. And it can be something really creative. Sometimes it's fun to have people dress up in costumes and do the presentation, to put things on as official looking stationery as possible. Or if you really are going to go, let's say, present something to an elementary school, bring in the elementary school teacher themselves to make the invitation. So there's a lot of really interesting and creative things you can do to really ramp up the excitement at the beginning of a project. So the first day is always very recipe-like. You introduce your entry document, or you have your entry event, and then you start by reading the document out loud. And this is really very important because students on their own don't necessarily have the reading skills to pick this all out, and it's really helpful to have an intelligent adult voice who knows what the project is going to be about to read it very carefully for them so they can get the details. This allows students to see the whole overview of the project. Once you've done that, you go back through and you read the document through a second time slowly. And this time you have the students take out different colored pens and pencils, or sometimes they can underline or circle, and they're going through looking for two very specific things. They're going to tear that entry document apart. The first category is, what do they know about this project? Just based on this entry document or this entry event, what information is this document giving them about exactly what they're going to have to do? And then, what are they going to need to know in order to complete this project? I'm going to give you an example of this by talking about a project that I did a couple of years ago. And this was for the students in my senior English class who were going to be reading Beowulf. The major idea that I wanted them to get out of Beowulf is this idea of the hero. The entire course in British literature was actually constructed around this idea of heroes and monsters. So starting with Beowulf, I wanted them to see the connection between the idea that a hero serves the community's needs. And as the community's needs change, so do our definitions of what a hero is. So for example, for the Anglo-Saxons, their needs were for basic survival. So their heroes were pretty much based around the idea of pure physical strength. As we got into, further developed civilization, our heroes got much more nuanced and developed intellectual skills, moral courage, and those kinds of qualities too. So when I designed the Beowulf Award as a project, what the students got was an entry letter that looked like something straight out of the Lieutenant Governor's office that announced that they were going to get to nominate people for this this new North Carolina award called the Beowulf Award, and specifically that they were going to be putting together a portfolio about their nominee to show how their nominee was a hero for their community. In other words, what metaphorical dragons did their hero slay in the community, similar to the way that Beowulf had slayed a literal dragon for his people. So the kids got this invitation letter, and then on the second read through, they took their different colored pens and they started working on their nose and need to knows. And here are some of the samples that came out of this. So as they looked at the entry document, they realized that they knew that they'd be working in teams of 4. They knew that they were going to have to nominate a local hero. They knew that their deadline was in 2 weeks. They knew that they would be creating a portfolio and making a Venn diagram, and that they were going to have to interview people about the person that they nominated. Some of the things that they were going to need to know were basic stuff like, who is Beowulf? What did Beowulf do? Why was Beowulf considered a hero? Who were these Anglo-Saxon people? Who were they going to personally nominate for a local hero? Who could they possibly interview about that person? Some people needed to know what a Venn diagram is, and then finally, what should go into our portfolio. Now, this is just a short sample of some of the things that came out of their first critical analysis of that entry document. After that, we used a round-robin approach to gather together all the needs to knows from the different classes and from the different teams. And again, this whole process really encourages that critical thinking and analysis of the document. It also lets you start to separate out kids. There may be some students who already have some background in Anglo-Saxons, for example, or who have been making Venn diagrams since kindergarten. You can start crossing off the duplicate items, combining things that are similar, and then this becomes a way to map out your whole project, because you can revisit your need to knows at various points in the project. And you can say, okay, so here's something that you needed to know. Do you know this now? Are you comfortable with this? Can we move it over into the other column? Or at that point, they may have thought of something new that they need to investigate or explore as they dig further into the actual topics. Once you've got your entry document or event and the kids have kind of dug into that a bit, it's a time to get your teams set up. And there's lots of different ways that you can put the groups together, and that's the subject for a whole different video. But it's very important that you have a group contract. The formality of this is important, and the actual practicality of having it written down, because maybe you wouldn't be surprised at how much the kids will actually forget along the way. It's really good if the students choose very specific roles that they're going to need. I usually use some sort of a spokesperson, a librarian, a researcher, and a timekeeper. And those are just some samples. And the groups should discuss together their code of conduct, their various expectations for what they want to accomplish, very specifically, who here wants to get an A, who here is just trying to pass. So they have some understanding of what the work ethic is going to be in the group. They should set some parameters for what they expect for work outside of the class, how they're going to contact each other. If they're comfortable with it, they might text each other, phone numbers at that point, and they figure out what they're going to do if they're absent, etc. And then they decide and actually write out the entire firing process. Now, the firing process is really key because it means that it's your way of keeping people in your group accountable. Usually, I encourage the students to give 2 written warnings to a student who's not holding up their end of the bargain, then a conference with the teacher, and then a phone call home before the student can be fired from the team. Now, if you're fired from a team, it's not quite the Donald Trump move. What it means is you get to still do the whole project, but you have to do it from the very beginning, all alone, with no change in the deadline. So you're really just thrown out there to the wolves without the group to support you, and you're still expected to complete all parts of the project if you get fired from your team. Now you move into running your project. And this is where the classroom is going to start to look very different from a traditional classroom. You're going to see teams of kids working on very different things depending on what it is that they need to know. The students really analyze, plan, and complete the tasks. So for the Beowulf, for example, nearly every kid said, well, I really need to read Beowulf. So we decided on various ways that they could do this. Some people wanted to we were using iPads at the time with a digital version of it. We had a graphic version of the book. Some kids wanted to read it out loud. So there were lots of different approaches that they took took that they could fit whatever seemed to be most appropriate for them. The teacher's role is to provide the scaffolding activities, like they might have certain chapters that you would assign by certain dates, there might be certain practice exercises that you would do within the class, and the teacher also plans small group workshops. So you announce workshops on various concepts that kids are struggling with. This way the kids that already get it can go ahead and do some of the more advanced work, and the kids that are struggling get that extra support. You can also make workshops mandatory. Either sometimes you have one person from every team has to attend the workshop and then report back to the team so they become a resource for the team, or you can make it mandatory for specific individuals who maybe didn't do as well on the last quiz when you were checking on how they'd done on reading those past chapters. Now, students can also request the workshops, or what's really fun is to even have them lead a workshop. If they feel that they've mastered a skill and are comfortable in an area, they get to offer the workshop and their peers can come to that as well. So when you walk into a PBL classroom, it kind of looks like the kids are all doing 1,000 different things, and in many ways they are, but it's very much an organized chaos with the teacher not acting as the classic sage on the stage, but is really that idea of the coach on the sideline who's facilitating and running not running the project directly, but helping manage it as the kids go along. An absolutely crucial part of project-based learning is the rubric. The teacher has to create a very detailed rubric and have it available to the students very near the beginning of the project. And this helps the kids with their need to know, so they can look at it and really analyze what is it that I'm expected to do. The expectations are clear and that begin with the end in mind. They're put in place right from the very beginning. I usually divide mine into 3 categories: a proficient category, which says this is what the baseline measurement that I expect everybody to get to, and then allow an exemplary category for kids who go above and beyond, and then the classic below standard for kids who are not meeting that proficient. One of the things you can do with the rubric is really decide which of the curriculum and soft skill goals you want to measure on this particular project. Not every project, for example, is going to measure writing skills. Not every project is going to measure research skills. So you can use that to kind of make sure across a whole course that you're hitting all of these points as you go through things. So you're coming up to deadline, the kids' portfolios are ready, their need to know column has been completely crossed out and moved over to the know already column, and it's time for your presentation day. Now, presentation day works best if you can use outside judges. Even if you can just get other teachers in the building to come in or other students in the building to come in, it makes a huge difference for the students to know that they have an audience to present for who's not just the teacher who's giving them a grade. You really want to spend some time at some point in the year or at some point in the project coaching them on presentation skills. It's usually fun to designate a class ambassador who can greet these visiting judges as they come in, and you really want to encourage the students to dress professionally for this day, or they can dress appropriately for their topic. Sometimes they may want to be dressed in matching t-shirts or colors, or they maybe want to be dressed in some sort of costuming that fits their topic. But the idea is to make sure that they know that this is a day set apart, that this is different from their ordinary classroom time. And then you use the same rubric that you gave to the kids at the beginning, and you grade them right there on the spot. So as they're actually doing their presentation, as a teacher, you're sitting there filling this all out. Now, you'll have a portfolio to review later on, but this really does help with the grading process. So that's being done as the kids are presenting, and it'll save you a lot of time as a teacher in the end. The final part of the project is the reflection. Now, a lot of kids will toss this off and they think this is just kind of busy work at the end, or, a cute way to give a little feedback form. But really, this is a critical part of their learning. This is where the learning really takes place. It's their chance to really think about their critical thinking and their self-analysis. The important thing is if they did well on a project, for them to understand why they did well, so they have an opportunity to repeat that success. And if they didn't do well, to really look at why was this not an effective strategy, and what can I do to avoid this in the future. Peer reviews can also be a part of the process, but I do not encourage peer grading. Peer grading just puts too much pressure on the kids themselves, but some sort of feedback from the peers and the team that they work with can be really beneficial for the students. I think the most controversial part of projects, and certainly one of the things that I spend a lot of time explaining to both students and parents at the outset of the school year, is the whole concept of group grades. Now, not every grade that they get through a project is going to be a group grade, but it is important that the final grade is. If you don't have group grades, you really are never going to get to that level of teamwork. If you don't have that level of teamwork, the students don't learn how to resolve these sorts of conflicts. And what you put in place with the firing process is a way for students to communicate in a professional, responsible, and civilized way to students who are not pulling their weight. This mirrors the real world. In the real world, we're often put in situations where our own success is dependent on whether or not the person in the next cubicle or the teacher in the next classroom is doing his or her job. And we have to work through something if we want the whole program to be successful. We have to find a way to communicate those ideals and those goals and those common shared visions and expectations in a way that's going to be effective. So it really encourages all the students to work together so that no one student is stuck doing all the work and no student can kind of float their way through the project. The firing process gives a student who's not doing their own weight a chance to recover from that, understand what the danger that they're in, and then eventually, if need be, understand that they're going to do this on their own without the benefit of the team. So to wrap this all up, project-based learning is giving the kids a real project that they have to create or a problem that they have to solve. You teach your curriculum through small group workshops, videos, or some whole class kind of scaffolding exercises that meet the kids where they are with their specific needs to know and allows them to pick activities that match up to their own learning styles. You require a presentation for a real-world audience, and then you allow students some time to reflect on the process. And that's project-based learning. Bye.